Can you all hear me okay?
Yeah.
Great, great. Well, first off, thank you, Bonnie, and all of you for organizing the event. Thank you all for being here on Saturday night. I think this is exactly what democracy is all about, and I appreciate you all being here. I'm Pat Ryan. I was born and raised here in the district in Kingston. When I came home from serving in Iraq, I wanted to start a business to actually get better technology to our troops on the front lines. And from that experience, I took several lessons, I think, that are really relevant to the first question about job creation. We grew the company from a few people to 150 people in 3 years. And the way we did that, I think, can be replicated here. We took mostly veterans who were coming home from serving, who didn't have the skills they needed in information technology, and we started a training program, a skills-based training program, to arm them with those and get them quality jobs that would allow them to really provide a good living for their families. I think that that approach can be replicated here, and I can bring my experience in doing that here. And it's particularly important, I think, because only about a quarter, as you know, of our young people are going to college, and that percentage is declining. We've got to invest in other pathways to good jobs here so that our young people can stay here and that others can continue to kind of move up into new, better jobs. The second thing I want to talk about is healthcare. For too long, this has become a partisan and a political issue, but we all in this room know that universal coverage and reliable access is just plain the right thing to do, period. And we saw that if John Fasso's bill and the Republican bill had been pushed through, Delaware County in particular would have been hit with a double whammy. So one, thousands would have lost coverage immediately, and two, our medical facilities and healthcare workers would have had federal funding, which is critical to keep access available, cut. I think, in particular, on access, there are three big things we need to do. One, we need someone in Congress who's actually going to fight for federal funding for our rural hospitals. Two, we need to scale up debt repayment programs for our doctors so we can attract and retain good doctors right here. And three, we need to both improve broadband coverage and invest in telemedicine so that folks don't have to drive an hour, 2 hours, or more for many of their healthcare needs to be met. I think a lot of us you'll hear from probably agree on a lot of the issues and the importance of healthcare and job creation. I also think we recognize, though, we need to beat John Fasso. And I've done the math, I've done the analysis, and when you look at the numbers, we know that to do that, not only are all the Democrats going to need to come out and vote, but we're going to need to pull in independents, we're going to need to pull in Republicans. I think I'm uniquely qualified to do that. We can talk more about it, but number one, I'm from here. I get the problems and I get the opportunities. Number two, I've been a small business owner. I think I can go make the case to small business owners, whether Republican or Democrat, that progressive policies are actually good for their business and good for our economy. And number three, my whole life I've tried to serve my community, serve my country. And in doing that, I think about the moments in Iraq where I would look right and look left as we were about to go out on a mission. And I didn't see a Democrat or a Republican. I saw a person who I was going to work with to accomplish an important mission for the greater good. That is the approach. That's the approach that I want to bring, and sorry I ran over time.
Is everybody here ready to beat John Fasso? It's an honor to be here. Thank you, Bonnie. Thanks for setting this up. I'm Jeff Beals. I'm a local school teacher in Woodstock, where I teach with my wife, Sue Hare, who's here, and where my sons go to school, Abraham and Joseph. They're playing in the play area back there. I'm also a former U.S. diplomat and a former intelligence officer with the CIA. And I was one of the longest-serving diplomats in the Iraq War, where I was decorated by the Army and the State Department for the work I did to bring all sides together in a constitution and ceasefire talks to help get us out of the war. My background in the Hudson Valley goes back to my grandparents, all four of whom were survivors of the Holocaust and came to the Hudson Valley as a place of refuge. My father, who's also here tonight, worked in Ellenville as a waiter, and in time he joined with my uncle and they built our family farm in the Hudson Valley where we raise livestock, goats, turkeys, and cattle. This is where I lose the vegans in the crowd. What I wanted to talk about tonight is how I came back here after the war to serve our country. I served overseas, and I believe very strongly that the fight for democracy, which I thought was there, was more aptly waged here. So I came back to my family's farm, I answered a call to begin teaching, and I faced a reality that all of us are facing, which is that our community is under attack right now. It's under attack, and we're in a state of crisis because we have a representative who is not representative, who has taken steps to strip our families and our children of their health care. We're in a crisis because our own Democratic Party is in a state of crisis. We have lost much of the country. We have lost this very district every single time since the lines were drawn in 2010 in a new district. And we're in a state of crisis for a third reason, because our economic system, writ large, is rigged against working people who cannot get ahead. So we're all here to ask, what can we do about this? Why have we been losing, and what can we do to start winning? And that's what I want to talk about. We can do it by uniting. We can do it by uniting behind a progressive platform that actually brings together the working people in this district behind causes that I believe they all stand for. Those causes are universal health care and Medicare for all. We can unite to lower prescription drug prices. We can unite to make Social Security benefits what they should be and raise them. We can unite to face climate change with sensible policies and a sensible energy policy and bringing science back into our decision making. We can unite to protect women's reproductive health. All of these things are under attack right now. Now, these are not just slogans. These are a platform. These are things that I've been involved with as an activist and as a diplomat overseas. I have brought people together before. I served in the US government for a decade, and my principal accomplishment was bringing together diverse sides in a difficult situation. If we face down these policies and these challenges, I believe we can forge a coalition bigger than any we've ever had before. We can bring a new generation forward into our politics, and we can rally a larger majority than we've ever had by standing for working people and nominating somebody who, in my case, is very unusual, as somebody who is a working person in this district, who voted in this district in the last election, who is trying to get by as a two-income family in this district, and is the only candidate who's standing here with a record of government service that is so long that I can hold it up against John Fasso's and face him very strongly as somebody who has given to this country, who has accomplished for this country, and now wants to stand by the community that I know so well, as somebody who's been a farmer here, as somebody who is a teacher here, and as somebody who has served it overseas. That's why I'm running. It's why I believe we truly can unite New York 19, and it's why I'm so excited that we're all here tonight. Thank you.
Just want to remind you that the questions that people were asked to address are in the program, so that you can follow along with that. Okay. Brian?
Thank you. This fight against right-wing extremism isn't new to me, nor is it to many of you. I stand before you with a record of 30 years of progressive activism, of getting things done. My passion and determination started when I was 19 years old, when my brother was murdered by terrorists. From that day forward, I fought for justice for him and other people who can't speak for themselves. In the 1990s, I fought for immigrant rights and taught English as a second language to undocumented workers. I then helped start a specialized public high school because I saw an attack on public schools, and I did it in collaboration with the teachers' unions, not against them. In the early 2000s, when I saw the Bush administration sell out to the fossil fuel industry, I helped start environmental entrepreneurs here in New York State. And in 2004, when I saw that the Democratic Party was brotherless and lacked a message, I formed a group called the Democratic Agenda with Kirsten Gillibrand. And top of our list of things that the Democratic Party should stand for was universal health care and Medicare for all, starting in 2004. I stand before you today telling you the current debate about health care that's happening in this country gives us the path forward to get Medicare for all. We were this close to having public option signed on. That's the way forward. And I think in order to bring healthcare that's more affordable and more accessible, we do Medicare for all. Second, in order to bring down the cost of prescription drugs, I believe that we need to, do you know that it's actually illegal for Medicare to negotiate with the drug companies? That's the first thing I would pass. And the laws themselves are written by the lobbyists and special interests so that the drug prices actually are enabled by the Medicare laws to go up. Those are two things we can do. And the third thing, to bring down accessibility in rural communities like Delaware County, what we need to invest in is healthcare workforce development. My doctor for over 10 years in Greene County, which is a rural county like yours, he has 3 urgent care facilities. What he needs are more nurse practitioners to help him so he can broaden the services that he can provide. And he's Republican, and he also now believes in Medicare for all. Job creation is the most important issue that I hear in this district. I come in front of you with over 30 years in job creation. These are good-paying, middle-wage jobs that I've been able to create. What my company does is we make life-saving medical devices that you use in the hospital every day. We upskilled our employees. So in order to create more jobs in this community and communities in Delaware County, we need to train and retrain employees for the jobs that exist today. We need to work with schools, including SUNY Delhi, and the high schools, and the unions to create those training programs so that we can do for the jobs that exist today. We also need to invest in transportation infrastructure. That's not only has the benefit of giving people more accessibility jobs, but it also has a multiplier effect in communities. We need to invest in digital broadband and cell service. Whether you're an electrician or a plumber, you cannot actually have an effective small business if you don't have access to those things. We need to invest in small agriculture. Right now, large agriculture has a stranglehold on it. We need to invest in those programs in order to get great jobs for these communities. I stand before you as someone who has a proven record as a progressive Democrat, someone who has proven to create jobs, but also, importantly, I have marched the halls of Congress, marched on the UN. I've gotten specific legislation passed that not only makes us safer, but held big corporations accountable that allowed the bombing that killed my brother and 269 other people. That type of legislative experience, that type of job creation experience, that type of experience of being tough on terrorism, that not only resonates with us and the people in this room, but it's something that will resonate with swing voters and moderate Republicans. And I believe the Democratic Party, we don't need to modulate, we don't need to moderate, we don't need to triangulate. We need to take our ideas, our beliefs, and we need to sell them to the working class people in this district. Because if we do that, we will win back the hearts and minds of people, and they'll vote for us once again. Thank you very much.
Looking at this crowd tonight, this afternoon, on a Saturday afternoon in Delhi, I know we're going to take back the house. We're going to beat FASO because we have over 100 folks here tonight. And it's so encouraging. It's in August, the summer in August. It's great. My name is Gareth Rhodes. I want to thank Bonnie. I didn't see Tom Schimmerling here at all, the county chair, but okay, fantastic. Tom, it's not always easy for a Democrat to win in some of these rural areas. I know Tom fights hard for that with Bonnie and so many others in this room. I have to say I was driving out here today down Route 28, and I couldn't help but think back on a Saturday afternoon in the last weekend in August, about 6 years ago, when Hurricane Irene hit this community and hit communities all across this Catskills and Hudson Valley. I was working in Albany in state government at the time, and everyone thought that Hurricane Irene was going to hit New York City and wipe out the subways, but it hit our community. It hit our community bad. And I remember coming down to Margarettsville and going to Bun and Cone, where I'd grown up, and having ice cream cone after we'd been fishing on the Delaware. And everything was gone. All those small businesses. And we worked and we helped the small businesses there, the homeowners clean up. And I worked with the state government to bring back aid to these communities. And I stopped by there on the way here and talked to some of my friends who are still there. And the communities come back. And to me, that is such a symbol of who we are. The resilience of us here in upstate New York and the grit we have that in times are toughest, there's nothing that will hold us back. And with that resilience, I know we can defeat FASO next year and doing it all together. A little bit about myself. I was born and raised in Ulster County, right here in New York 19. I grew up working on a farm, picking corn in the morning before schools. We had livestock as well, and after the turkeys were gone and Thanksgiving, we play hockey for the winter. I lost a couple of teeth doing that. After I graduated from Kingston High School, a lot of farm kids who growing up, we didn't go out and go right to college. Neither of my parents were college graduates. I went out and got a job drilling water wells. I know almost all of you probably have a water well in your backyard. Drilled water wells all over this area. I was part of my local fire department. I finally got a chance to go to college. Went to CUNY down in New York City. Bonnie, I was a CUNY professor at CUNY as well, so we had that shared connection. And then I got a job working in state government. And I've worked a lot in this community on job creation. And I was talking the other day to a gentleman who had a bed and breakfast out here in the Catskills. And I said, you know, how's everything going? And he said, we finally got a fiber optic cable. We finally have Wi-Fi. So we've changed our whole website and taken away the picture of the mountains in the background with a big banner saying we have Wi-Fi. You can now get married here in our community, because if you don't have internet, people don't want to come, and they can't put the pictures on Facebook that evening. And that's what I believe we need to do to create jobs. We need to have cell phone service up and down Route 28.
Yeah.
We need to bring Wi-Fi and broadband to our communities. And in terms of healthcare, I think, as others have said, we Democrats are right in this issue. We spend more money in America than almost any other country, and we get less. This is an issue that resonated with our small business owners. That's what I'm doing. I'm going to the small business owners, going to the firemen, because that's what I was, a fireman, going to the farms, because Medicare for All and our policies as Democrats are right for small businesses, right for our communities that are hurting the most, and we need to take that message to our rural communities, take it to areas where Democrats haven't shown up in the past. That's what I'm doing, because we are right on the ideas as Democrats, and that's what we have to do to win and beat John Faso next year. So thank you very much.
I just want to mention that there are some empty seats here if people want to fill in.
Good afternoon. How's everybody doing today? Good. My name is Antonio Delgado. I live in Rhinebeck with my wife Lacey, who is here, and our twin boys Maxwell and Coltrane, 4 years old. I'm standing here today because I remember what it was like growing up in this area. I'm from Schenectady, the child of a working class family. I remember what it was like when my parents got those jobs at GE, really good jobs, and how those jobs allowed us to work our way up from the working class to the middle class. I remember when they would come home from a long day's work and make sure that I did my homework every night, because they believed that in this country, education was the great equalizer. It was the gateway to opportunity. I'm running for Congress because for too long, our political leaders have failed to give voice to working families like the one I grew up in, and like many of yours. For too long, they have failed to provide a vision for a way forward in an ever-changing global economy. They have forgotten those values that give hope to working families like ours. Freedom, equality, fair play, opportunity. Now we know what's been happening over the last 30-some-odd years. There's been a shift from public good to private greed. The economy has doubled in size, while wages have remained stagnant. Inequality has skyrocketed. And what's happened along the way? Continued failed policies of trickle-down economics and a continued effort to cut taxes for the super rich and the super wealthy. If we want to create jobs, we have to get back to building from the ground up. That means identifying growth locally all across this district. That means finding where that growth lives, whether it's agriculture, whether it's renewable energy, whether it's high-tech manufacturing. It means investing in that growth. It means empowering that growth by getting access to capital, by building out our infrastructure, broadband, regional distribution and processing plants for our local farmers. It also means retraining our workforce for the high-tech manufacturing jobs that are available to them. And it means getting back to more targeted education in the form of vocational schools, trade schools, and apprenticeship programs. Now, the reason why we haven't done this work for so long is because our political leaders have forgotten our core values. And there's no better example of this than the American Health Care Act, a disgrace, and a moral piece of legislation that set about taking thousands of folks in this district off of health care just to give a tax break to a wealthy few. And our congressman's name is all over that bill. All over. Now, the way forward is to fight for affordable, accessible health care for everyone. And a practical step in the right direction, in my opinion, is a public option. Let's give folks a choice to opt into Medicare, to opt in to Medicaid. We can think about these issues critically and move in the right direction. We also have to lower the price of prescription drugs. Medicare should negotiate drug prices. And let's get rid of this god-awful practice of prescription drug companies paying generic companies to not release their own brand to save an extra buck or two for themselves and hurt you. To beat John Faso, it's going to take a lot of work. He's seasoned, he's well-funded, he's got a machine behind him, okay? But a candidate that can outwork him, that can outraise him, that can out-organize him, can beat him. And you're looking at it. I can outwork him. I spent 3 or 4 months before I even announced, traveling all across this district, listening, engaging, speaking, doing the work, raising the money to prove to you and to me that I can do this. 2 quarters in a row, I've outraised him. Third, we win when we show up, when we vote. Resources matter. Hitting every corner of this district matters. Boots on the ground matters. Knocking on doors matters. Resources help, but inspiration does too. A voice helps too. Being empowered to believe in yourself helps too. And that's what I'm here to do. Thank you.
Good evening. I'm David Clay. I'm here to beat John Faso. That's the only reason I'm here, just to let you know. So I'm going to take on the first question first, which is the first most important question. Why am I the best person to beat John Faso? I'm the person with the most roots in this community. I'm the person who has the most experience. My wife Karen and I moved to Kingston back in 1981. We raised our family in Woodstock. We've been here for 36 years. I've been involved in community activity for the last 35 years. Karen has been involved as a school teacher in Kingston for 20 years. I have helped in my law practice, which I started back in 1981, over 1,000 people. Karen has taught many students. We have literally an army of people who are waiting to support us. The way to win this district is through grassroots organizing and grassroots electioneering. And we are the ones who are in the best position to do that. Now, what has my community activity been? Well, I have been involved in starting the homeless shelter and starting the Ulster County Habitat for Humanity, in working and mentoring with inner city kids for the last 25 years as a basketball coach. I'm currently involved in multiple charitable organizations, Midtown Rising, Family Woodstock, which you might have heard about. I'm out there and people can know what my heart wants to do, not by what I say, but what I've done. I've also served as a public servant, as a volunteer in service to America, as a member of the Board of Health of Ulster County, and as a Human Rights Commission chairperson for the last 3 years. So I have proven myself in terms of standing up to John Faso and saying, look what I've done, and look how much I care for our community. What have you done besides take corporate money and earn a living by pretending to be a politician that cares for his constituents and actually catering to the rich and the corporate interests? So I've spent my whole career fighting for the civil rights of people, fighting for workers' rights, fighting against corporate abuse, fighting against corporate greed. I'm the best person to come to John Faso and say, John, what you are and what you have been and what you continue to be is a corporate lobbyist that caters only to the interests of the ultra-wealthy, pretends to do the job that he's there for, which is to do the best for us, and yet betrays us at every occasion for the rich and the powerful. So I'm here to tell you that whatever it takes, I will do. Now, in terms of jobs, I just want to let you know quickly, I agree with broadband for everyone. I agree that we have to develop new jobs. Now, one thing I've been involved in for quite some time is a thing called Youth Build, and it's a federally supported grant, and it's local donations, and it teaches kids trades. It teaches them carpentry and plumbing and electricity, and it gives them a skill and it gives them certification. They go out and do it. We can add that. Let's put broadband on the list. Let's put new energy jobs on the list with wind power and solar power. And I have to join in with everybody. I'm a universal healthcare proponent. I think that the pharmaceutical companies have robbed us and treated us badly. For all the reasons that have already been said, they need to be bargained with. We have the massive market control of the government. we don't use it to reduce prices of the pharmaceutical industry. They spend $7 billion a year advertising. That's money we could use to provide health care to those who don't have it. Let's use those skills, let's use what we have to make a change for this country. Thank you very much.
Good afternoon. My name is Sue Sullivan. I'm thrilled to be here, and thank you, Bonnie, and everyone for coming out and organizing this event. This is my third time in Delaware County since May. So I was thrilled to walk in and see so many friends and faces. I want to get right to answering the questions that were posed to us. And I approach problem solving in a very pragmatic, structured way. And so when I look at jobs, that's something I know a lot about. I've worked for over 30 years, creating jobs, retaining jobs, and building community, leveraging public and private partnerships, and supporting and enhancing our educational system. So I have a three-level platform for job creation. The first being infrastructure, which we've all talked about. We will not have a revised economy and revitalization if we do not add to our infrastructure, and in particular broadband. That's very, very clear. It's unfortunate that our president over the last 7 or 8 months has not moved forward an infrastructure bill. It was purported to be $1 billion, and it did include broadband. So as your congresswoman, that would be a #1 priority for me. In addition to that, in my district offices throughout the 19th, I would establish economic development zones. And those zones would be your one-stop shopping hub for all the resources that the federal government provides related to job creation and economic development, as well as information and access to state and local sources. I believe that we need to stop talking and get to work with real definable initiatives. It's interesting, the US SBA, spent some time on their website because I don't really know what they do. And they have learning modules, 61 learning modules to help small businesses. Well, if you don't have broadband, it's not doing you any good. In addition to that, education, training, and workforce is necessary. We have very low unemployment right now, which is a good thing, except there's many, many people who have fallen off of that list and radar. We need to work with our local community colleges to expand certificate programs to meet the needs of employers. I know Delhi has a great program for trades, and we need to start not only with our youth, but with folks who are a little older, like me, who might be looking to recreate my profession and jobs. As far as healthcare is concerned, I've worked for over 15 years in healthcare policy. I successfully changed legislation to expand the access to services in my community. So I, like others, agree that we need universal healthcare, single payer. It's the only thing that makes sense. The numbers don't work otherwise. But in addition, I'm also very concerned about primary care. Primary care physicians are the coordinator of all the future care, and yet they're not compensated at that level. I'm also concerned about physician and rural access. It's tough to recruit physicians in New York State. It's even tougher to get them to come to rural areas. So I believe that we need to expand the physician service loan repayment process. Telemedicine, something that can work, but hey, there's broadband again. It's not going to work if we don't have that kind of access. Finally, why am I the candidate? Well, I'm going to tell you. I've lived here my whole life, and with all due respect, Dave, I think I gotcha.
Gotta say, my colleagues are a tough act to follow. So my name is Stephen Breezy. Thank you, Bonnie, by the way, for having us, and thank you, everyone, for coming. My name is Stephen Breezy. I was born in Putnam County. I lived in Ulster County, Dutchess, Sullivan and Orange. I've lived all around the district. I've never left. There was a trip to Alaska once, but other than that, it's purely been in and around this district. It's all I know. I went to high school in Walk Hill, graduated just outside the district. I went to college at SUNY Orange, where I majored in physics, chemistry, applied mathematics, and psychology. But I never got to finish. In the wake of the 2008 financial collapse, I lost my job, and with it, my car, my home, everything. And for 5 months, I was homeless. From there, I got a job at an IT company doing retail support for retail store support. But I only did that for a year and a half until my job was shipped to Canada, and I was right back where I started. I was homeless for about 4 months again, and it was waking up on a bench in front of Ruby Tuesdays in Middletown Galleria that I made a promise to myself that I was never going to let it happen again. 2 months later, I found the career that I do now. I analyze legislation. I learn the subject matter it pertains to. I conceive of every possible way someone at a company could break one of these laws, and then using behavioral patterns, data analysis, linguistics, I build something called a policy, which identifies when people at large financial firms could be breaking the law. I work to keep big banks in line, essentially. One thing that I've identified when it comes to what's curtailed job creation, I've seen it in financial firms. These large companies, these lobbyists, these special interest groups are going to Congress and they are lobbying for legislation which stifles small businesses, increasing compliance costs for banks. These small community banks which can't afford compliance processes, can't loan to small businesses. They can't pump money back into a community. So I believe in scalable regulation. The same problems that we had with the large financial firms that caused the global financial collapse, these weren't our community banks. These weren't the Ulster Savings or the Rhinebeck banks. They were the Wells Fargo and the Bank of America. But with these additional regulations that are being imposed on small community banks, instead of an Ulster Savings going up in your community, you see a Wells Fargo. And that's because they can't afford it. We need to incentivize loaning to small businesses, and we need to scale regulations to fit exactly who we're trying to regulate. Healthcare, we're all on the same page. Single payer, healthcare is a right. It shouldn't be an argument, I personally believe. We should negotiate Medicare prices, or Medicare should be able to negotiate prices, and we need to streamline our FDA drug approval processes. How many times do we have to bring a pharmaceutical CEO in front of a congressional hearing and yell at them only to not be able to do anything? We need to change that immediately. What separates me is that having a science background, I'm running for Congress because I looked at our governing body and I felt that they lost touch with reality. And we need a scientist to bring that back.
Thank you all.
One thing that we've been noticing, especially with this new administration, is climate change.
Oh, could you stand up?
Oh, sorry.
Requests.
Sorry. Is climate change denial. The policies that are being instituted currently and that have been instituted, my biggest concern is that they are pushing the problem of climate change onto my generation to solve. The people who are currently in Congress, Donald Trump, they're not going to be affected by the drastic, they're not necessarily going to be affected as much by the drastic changes that we're about to see. What I support, funding energy research, which creates more jobs, alternative energy, more jobs than fossil fuels. It's no-brainer. In addition to that, investing in research. For every dollar that we invest in green energy research or into NASA, we get money back from that. The necessity is the mother of all invention. If we create these green alternatives to provide people who deny climate change, who drive these big trucks, who want to keep those, if we provide a cheaper and better alternative, which also works to save our environment, I believe that that's how we can at least curtail what is currently happening to our planet. As far as getting the carbon out of the atmosphere, we need to scale up carbon scrubbing, I personally believe. And we need to stop enacting policies that damage our planet. This is the only planet we have to live on. So why do we keep trying to destroy it?
Well, the first thing that I would be concerned about, and as your congresswoman I will take care of, is stopping the dismantling of our EPA. I think that the current administration reduction in focus on the EPA is undermining our entire environmental position. Beyond that, I also agree in climate change, and I look at climate change from a number of different components. We all want clean air and clean water. I don't think there's anyone on any side of any party that could disagree with that. However, I do believe that if we don't do something and do something with specific measures, it's going to impact our economy in the 19th district. Think about the people who come to this area because it's beautiful. I worked for 5 years at the Mohonk Preserve, New York's largest land trust. And I have the opportunity to educate people about the importance of stewarding the natural resources and enjoying it. Look at the Hudson River. We've just gone through the whole barge docking debacle. I think that we need to think long-term. I think we need to hold corporate interests accountable. And I think that we need to remain very, very focused, and not only for us, but for our kids and grandchildren.
I think my biggest concern is trying to stop the fossil fuel industry from ruining our air and our water and taking pipelines across our farmlands and across our streams and across our cities. I've looked at both the Pilgrim Pipeline and the Constitution Pipeline. The Constitution, I believe, was planned to go through here. There is a federal Court of Appeals case that just came down. Fortunately, it's temporarily blocked. But pipelines for the fossil fuel industry actually is being promoted by the Koch brothers, and they're transporting oil from North Dakota all the way to Albany, and then want to take it down from Albany or into Pennsylvania or into New Jersey and New York City. But when they run pipelines through our land, through our district, we are accepting all the risk. There's something like 253 streams that the Constitution Pipeline would go by. And every one of those is a hazard and a risk that if it breaks, the oil spill will contaminate that stream, and that stream will lead to another stream into a river, and our whole environment will be affected. So we have to stand strong against them. And people like John Faso, who, by the way, worked as a lobbyist for the Constitution Pipeline, and takes money from the Koch brothers. That's a congressman that we don't want. And what you do want is a congressman that cares about our environment. The Catskill Mountains are pristine, and they are one of our greatest jewels, along with our farmland and our valleys and the Hudson River and all the streams. We need to protect that, and that is what I will jealously work to protect if I become the congressman. Thank you.
I think for me, my primary concern, and I think it's already been addressed to some extent, is climate change. You know, the science is not with ideology. It's just fact, empirically based data. It does not come with an agenda. That's why we call it science. We've gotten way, way away from understanding that fact. But the record is clear. 5-6 years in a row, hottest temperatures on extreme weather events increasing at an exponential clip. And yet we are still confronted with the basic question, is climate change real? And I think at this point we all know why. Because of the propaganda machine funded by the Koch brothers, this misinformation campaign that is doing us harm and doing our future harm. We have to get back to a place where we are leading out on this issue. The Paris Agreement, our choice to pull out of that, deeply disturbing. John Faso's vote to roll back the Stream Protection Act, deeply disturbing. We have too much on the line from the standpoint of moral implications, I would argue, and economic implications. The fact that our environment somehow cannot be married to job creation is another lie that the Koch brothers keep telling us. In fact, the wave of job creation depends on our investment in renewable energy and alternative sources. That's where the jobs actually come from. Protecting our air, protecting our water so that folks want to come here and spend their money for tourism purposes will help create and build our economy out. So these are the things that I'm focusing on, but critically it is climate change and being a fierce advocate for the science that tells us that climate change is indeed real. Thank you.
This question goes right to the heart of why John Faso is wrong for this community. That stream protection vote he took, one of the first votes he took. What was his excuse? Well, that's not my committee. One of the first votes he took. You have to side with the environment if there's a question on some things like that. I'll say, for farmers here, growing up on a farm here, climate change isn't some sort of political football. It is the extreme weather has driven up the price of crop insurance. The level of the aquifers is changing. The growing season, when you can plant, when you harvest, is changing. It's not some sort of political football. It's your bottom line. It's your business. I will say, growing up and hiking here in the Catskill Mountains, I remember when I would do that slide, Pekin Moose and Wittenberg, Cornell, and acid rain had devastated the tops of these mountains. You can trace that right back to the pollution that's coming out of the power plants in the western part of this country. Congress, with people like Maurice Hinchey, passed the Clean Air Act, cleaned up the Catskill Mountains. I could go fishing up there now. Our lakes have fish, which they didn't used to have. And that's why, if you represent this community, climate change, environment, shouldn't be any type of political issue. Chris Gibson was a Republican congressman here. He stood up to his party on environmental issues because we have the most beautiful part of not just New York State, not just the Northeast, of, I would argue, the entire United States. I know I'm biased here. And we have to stand up and protect it. It shouldn't be a political football. It shouldn't be for our farmers. It's their bottom line. And this is the home of the Hudson River, of the Neversink Valley. And we have to stand up and protect it. And that's what I'm going to do. Thank you very much.
For me, when it comes to environmental protection, it's local, not global. It's the local issues that matter most, and what I would focus on and say we need to. So first and foremost, the Stream Protection Act. Water is incredibly important here in Delaware County. We're in the watershed, as well as in Greene County. So I think the primary thing we need to focus on with is Hoosick Falls in Rensselaer County. Also, we have to look at the effect it's having on small agriculture in our communities here. Gareth had mentioned many of us were around during Irene and helped our neighbors and friends dig out. But the crop insurance, the effect on our communities and our farmers is incredible that climate change is happening. As I mentioned earlier, I come with 20 years of environmental activism. I've testified before city councils that have passed legislation that gave us hybrid cars. I commissioned an economic study that helped bring recycling back to New York. I think that the platform for environmental protection starts with one, stop the assault on the EPA, stop the assault on regulations, look at the opportunity for bipartisan support. Right now, George Shultz and Jim Baker have said that they're for a carbon tax. There's an opportunity for us there. We can't let that opportunity pass. We must go for the carbon tax. And the opportunity there, we need to make sure, because communities like this, which are reliant on fossil fuels, we have to make sure that there are subsidies to help people manage them. We also have to invest, as we heard earlier, in green-collar jobs that will create the opportunities going forward. But we also need to look at, and this is critically important, we need to look at the effects that we're going to have from a major initiative of the utility companies trying to make the transition from fossil fuels to renewables. Right now, we're arguing against the utility companies when we come out with any sort of environmental or green proposals. As a government, the federal government level, we need to figure out how to manage that transition from fossil fuels to renewables. And I think that comes from a legislative perspective Based on my experience, I put forth legislation that would enable us to manage that transition faster. Thank you.
Climate change is real. It is a crisis facing our environment right here in the Hudson Valley and Catskills, where we have to be the people that stand up for it most. And it's a crisis facing Delaware County in particular. I see Kathleen Hayek in the back. The two of us were talking with Delaware County soil and water officials recently, who are reporting flooding unlike anything they've seen before going on here in Delaware County. And that is a direct testament to a climate change problem that we know and experience from the ground up. I also noticed somebody that's worked on farming here. The growth seasons are out of whack. This is something that people who know the land, who know the environment, can testify to. But who can do something about this? Well, first you really need a trustworthy emissary from it. And I'll tell you, I have personal experience in this because when I left the State Department as a Middle East diplomat, I was offered a job by Exxon. They offered me more money in a year than I would make in many years of teaching, as I do in Woodstock. And I turned them down. I turned them down because I believed that we had to face climate change directly and that it was institutions like that that are actually trying to blind our eyes to the problem. But how do you do it? You do it by uniting people, and this is what I've been talking about when I say Unite New York 19 in my campaign. We have to rally larger groups of people, larger groups than even in this room, towards causes they believe in. And we need somebody that can raise those voices up. I've been working with student groups around our district. I've been throwing forums on issues that we care about, and I'm throwing one on climate change that is bringing people together in Kingston on October 30th. And that's the third in the series of forums that I'm throwing on the issues we need to deal with. And how are we going to deal with them? We're going to deal with them by putting ourselves back into the Paris Climate Agreement, by fully funding the EPA, and by taking the steps we all know we need to take to ensure that local farming is a viable prospect here in the Hudson Valley. I think we are destined to be the people that speak loudest for this, as the people who are the stewards of probably the most beautiful environmental expanse in the country. Thank you.
So the way I think about this is one of the top opportunities. To the earlier question of how do we win, I think the environment is one of our top opportunities to bring people together across this district, regardless of any political affiliation. And a lot of what my colleagues have said to that degree, I agree on. I think there are two different arguments to make, though, and depending on who we're talking to, we're going to have to make some combination of them both. So the first is, I believe, a moral imperative, which is the idea that my wife Rebecca, who is here in the audience, who I should have mentioned in my opening statement, and I are, we're thinking about starting and building our family, and the idea that my children won't be able to drink clean water here, that they won't be able to hike in the Catskills like I did, that they won't be able to run on the rail trail like I did, that is plain wrong. It just doesn't, it's not right. And that argument works for probably almost everyone in this room, and I wish for more. But we also have to talk about the pragmatic economic implications of environmental policy. We're at an inflection point on this, I think. President Trump and the Republican Party want us to keep going backwards to basically an economy that has done nothing to help us here, but build pipelines through the area which provide almost no jobs to our own people and damage our environment. We have an opportunity to actually look forwards and push us to look forwards on environmental issues that will benefit our economy, making investments in alternative energy, and I do believe this could become a hub for clean energy, green energy jobs. That is our unique strength here, and we've got to play to our unique strengths. Thank you.
I think that the most disturbing thing about what's going on right now with our current administration is our lack of a foreign policy in any measurable way. I believe that as a global economy, we need to figure out how to come together and fight for the interest of the United States while respecting our colleagues. I think that we need to look at the UN and see how we can work collectively the United States must do what's right in terms of humanitarian efforts around the world. But to have a president that announces he's sending troops without any accountability, that's not okay. And I think that as my kid's dad was in the military, I know what it's like for a family member to be deployed. I know how hard it is for the family at home. And I think our number one goal needs to be focusing on what's important from a moral standpoint internationally, but also really looking carefully at where we send our troops and the very specific reasons why.
There's a whole lot to be concerned about in terms of our foreign policy right now. We all know that President Trump has rattled his sword with respect to North Korea. Obviously, what's going on in the Korean Peninsula is a great concern to all of us. I think that diplomacy, obviously we had this question the other day, diplomacy is the only answer to having the world be made a safer place, where America takes a leadership in that and trying to bring countries together. We have problems in the Middle East. We have Russia and Iran taking over parts of the Middle East. Our war in Iraq has emboldened Iran. Iran is now using Western Afghanistan as its satellite. It has major control in Iraq. And we have not only not tried to engage in a way that brings to a point of diplomacy that we can discuss things with each other, but we have only rattled our sabers and threatened and talked about fire and fury toward people. That does not lead to anything except stupidity. And when you have a person like the North Korean Kim Jong-un, however that's pronounced, whenever you have somebody like that, you can't go around threatening. You can't go around just making idle threats. You have to use diplomacy, and this administration has taken its State Department and gutted it, and we're acting in a way that's totally irresponsible, and we have to change that. So I would be, as a congressman, trying to get the administration to work toward diplomatic relations with countries that we need to support what's in the best interest of the entire world. Thank you.
I think there are a number of issues that come to mind right away. North Korea, at this point, its development of the intercontinental ballistic missile, nuclear warhead, able to miniaturize it, it's a great threat. They're getting closer and closer to our shores. Their leader is unstable, Kim Jong-un. He has no moral sensibilities. And so it's difficult to figure out how to negotiate with an individual in that mind state. What makes it more complicated when you have another individual on the side who clearly shares in some of the same traits. And that's unfortunate. I also think, though, that it's important that we highlight the threat of terrorism that continues to loom large. And we saw that in Barcelona. And I think being thoughtful about how we deal with that continued threat, I think the new policy, if you want to call it that, in regards to Afghanistan, which to me remains unclear, is something that we have to think through. How do we deal with these pockets of areas across the world that don't have legitimate states or are flailing states and allow for these extremist groups to come up, seize hold, and become threats to us? Being present, but doing it in a way that brings our allies into the fold, speaking with our allies and our enemies at times is critical, but it takes thoughtfulness, it takes care, it takes a willingness to come to the table. We don't dismiss the appropriateness of military might, but that might doesn't really get us anywhere if it's not balanced with a real sense of purpose in terms of diplomacy and negotiation and coming to the table. Thank you.
I'm only here today in many ways because of American leadership abroad. My grandfather on one side of my family escaped with Nazi fascism in Europe and came and settled here in the Hudson Valley, became a janitor at New Falls High School, and my grandfather on the other side of my family was in the U.S. Army and fought in World War II to ensure that Nazism wouldn't spread beyond Europe. And in many ways, I believe that this is about American leadership must be smart. We must be, when we engage, we must engage fully. When we don't engage, we can't just do half love here. And what I believe is that the Congress has to have a role in this. And I remember very well in the community here, in Delhi, in Sydney, in Kingston, in New Paltz, communities in the Hudson Valley, in 2002, 2003, in the lead up to the Iraq War, many folks in this room stood up and said, absolutely not. And so many of the Democratic Party were on board with the Iraq War. In the Hudson Valley, we had a representative member of Congress who stood up and said no. And I think that's what we need. We need independent thinking, someone who's not going to go necessarily along with their party when everyone else is rushing to go to war, who looks at the facts, looks at what's happening, and if the United States is going to engage abroad, we do it completely and fully. And that's what I want to do in Congress, and that's what I believe we need as our representative in this community.
As I mentioned earlier, I have 30 years of experience in counterterrorism, and what I'm seeing now is that the Trump administration is undermining our efforts in what protect us most from terrorism are the alliances and institutions that we rely on. Right now, I think what we need to do is we need to reinvest in those alliances and reinvest in the institutions, the intelligence, the discipline, and the vigilance that makes that happen and protects us. I also believe the second issue we're going to have to deal with is nuclear proliferation and the issues with North Korea through strategic patience and economic sanctions and continued pressure on them, both through North Korea directly and through China. But I think the bigger issue from a foreign policy perspective is we're fighting against authoritarianism. We're fighting against authoritarianism in Russia, in Iran, in China, and I believe that the United States needs to reach out to our allies, strengthen those relationships, and create situations throughout the world where we start to box them in, the authoritarianism, and even though we're seeing it here in our own country. But those are the issues that authoritarianism needs to be addressed legislatively and have the support, and we need to put the economic sanctions in place. As I mentioned earlier, we were able to hold Libya accountable, not by invading Libya, but by putting on pressure and economic sanctions and UN sanctions on Libya in order to get the terrorist hands over and to stop their sponsorship of terrorism. We need to have that type of discipline and cooperation when we're dealing with Russia, with Iran, with the Islamic State, with China. And that leadership, that opportunity for the United States to take on authoritarianism that way can make a big difference. Thank you.
Our principal foreign policy challenge is an increasingly militarized mindset in our own country and in other ones that takes us away from solving things through diplomacy and towards war each and every time. I know this very intimately. I'm the only candidate standing here who served in the U.S. government for a decade in national security. And I worked on the President's Daily Brief. I worked with Secretaries of State and Secretaries of Defense on foreign policy. I fought very strongly for a diplomatic solution to conflicts, and I've had to do it in the face of a military complex that often tries to shout down diplomatic voices. It's one of the ironies of what I was telling you that I turned down that Exxon job, only to find Exxon took over the State Department. It's a tragic thing. A big reason I am running is that I believe so strongly that we have a wonderful platform to stand behind that can unite a wide swath of people in our district behind progressive policies. But we face opponents in the Republican Party and in our own administration who are entirely capable of ginning up national security threats to distract people from the issues that matter most to them. And that's why I realized, and a lot of people in my community who came to me to run realized, that a candidate who has that national security experience at the highest levels and can speak so strongly against that type of fear-mongering, some of which you're even hearing up here on the stage, just vague talk about terror threats, unstable foreign leaders who can't be spoken to. This is very dangerous talk. It's a very dangerous way to view the world, and it's something that I've experienced firsthand. There are reasonable people out there on all sides. There's many people that look at America right now and think, look at the president, you can't talk to them. You can. You can fully fund the State Department. You can be a leader in NATO. You can be a leader around the world for the values that we hold most dear. And when you do those things, you'll find America is much stronger instead of being weaker as the current administration takes it. Thank you.
believe that America has a special responsibility to lead in the global order. And we have to lead towards peace and security. I have seen firsthand the potential, but really more the limitations of what we can do with military force abroad. I spent 27 months in Iraq running into that wall, literally, and seeing the limits of what we could do. And when I came home, in addition to starting a business, I went to grad school to study this at Georgetown to try to figure out a better way. And I read and found this theory called smart power, which I believe is the right approach. And the idea is that the use of force and the use of the military is the last resort. That diplomacy, economic tradecraft, sanctions are the tools that need to be first in our toolbox. In just 6 or 7 months, we have seen the president, who is just completely out of his depth on all of these issues, take us nearly to the brink of nuclear war with North Korea, and we're still at that point. And I am not trying to fearmonger. I believe this, unfortunately, and honestly, it scares the hell out of me. And I've also seen him undercutting the alliances that for the last 70 years have relatively held the peace in our world. I think right now, at this moment, we need leaders in Congress who can stand up to the president, exercise the constitutionally defined responsibility of the Congress on these issues, speak with authority, speak with experience on these issues, and get us on a better track. I have been on the receiving end of an order to go to war, and there is nothing I take more seriously than that. Thank you.
There was a famous member of the Progressive Bull Moose Party that said, "Walk softly and carry a big stick," Teddy Roosevelt. We are barely carrying the big stick, and talking softly is not one of our strong suits currently. Understanding motivation is part of what I do for a living, understanding what motivates someone to do something. I'm not terribly worried about North Korea purely from the aspect of I believe that he's doing what he's doing out of self-preservation. He's seen leaders like Saddam Hussein and Muammar Gaddafi. He's seen them face brutal deaths, and his goal is to stay in power. So I believe understanding the motivations behind people allow us to institute better diplomacy, to negotiate better, to empathize with these people that are potentially going to destroy a massive percentage of people on this planet. But at the end of the day, I feel that it's important to understand what makes people tick. And as I've always said, never piss off anyone with nukes.
I have none. I'm a trial lawyer, right? So I kind of modify that a little bit with being a deacon. So I'm sure there's some people out there that think badly, there's lawyer jokes out there, and I'm not going to say any right now. But I think that's probably my biggest liability, that I'll be painted as somebody who's an ambulance chaser or something like that.
Okay, thank you. Antonio?
All right, so I studied philosophy and political theory in college as an undergrad and a graduate. I have gotten in the habit sometimes, and my wife can attest to this, of getting too deep inside my head and thinking a little bit too long about subjects and not being able to communicate as extensively as I should at all times. And I think it's important. And doing this, in fact, has made me get to the point quicker and make sure that I am thinking actively about my thoughts and how to engage quickly. Thank you.
I know that I'm a young guy, but I have government experience. I've work here in state and local government in this community with small businesses, with farms. In our darkest times after Hurricane Irene, I was in our communities working to help bring homeowners and farms and small businesses the grants they need to rebuild. And being young, I believe we need a new generation of leadership in Congress, and I have the energy, I have the drive, I have the passion to go to every single community in this district to win this seat back. Thank you.
My greatest vulnerability is that although I'm a proven lifelong progressive Democrat, I'm also a very successful businessman. And a lot of times people think those are mutually exclusive things. What I plan to do is to show that you can be very successful, you can be a capitalist, you can create good paying, working middle-class jobs, and at the same time be a vociferous, lifelong progressive Democrat. And I actually take that as something as a positive, not a negative. Thank you.
I am sharp-tongued, and I believe that we are in a fight, and I'm a fighter, and that can rub people the wrong way sometimes. I view this election as a pair of fights, as a fight within the Democratic Party to make us the party of working people, frankly, against lobbyists and against corporate interests that have taken over our party and turned it into a fundraising apparatus. And then I believe we have a secondary fight that's not that different against the Republican Party, which is largely a front for Wall Street interests and big corporate money. And I fight that very bluntly, and I say it very strongly.
So I've had a bunch of people say, hold on, you're a veteran and you're a Democrat? Wait, I didn't think that that combination existed. So I think that is my sort of challenge that I have to be able to speak to. I talked about it a little in my last answer and how my world experience has shaped the way I think about foreign policy and a lot of other issues of leadership. But I also think that that can be a strength. I think my ability to speak to people at a level that is above partisanship and above other kind of divisive identities is a strength to win in this district. Thank you. And I went over my time. That's another issue.
So rude. So being younger than Gareth is definitely is definitely something to take into consideration. But I'm getting out there, I'm meeting people. In addition to what I do for a living, it involves being closed into a back room and not being let out to talk to anyone except for food and water. But you know, running here and coming out and talking to people and engaging has really improved my social skills.
I love going after you. So my greatest liability is that I'm not wealthy, and nor do I have a large wealth network. And so what that means is it provides all of you an opportunity, because I am a hustler. I push hard to do what I think is right, and I fight. So join me, make my liability my asset, and let's do this.
Okay, thank you. You all did well in 30 seconds. The second
I voted, is this on? Oh. I voted in District 19 in the last congressional election. I voted against John Faso, and I threw a class for, actually a civics class for students, in which many of my students rallied for Zephyr Teach Out, and I had Faso's people into my class as well. My family farm is in Putnam County, in Putnam Valley, and before that I voted in New York 18 for Sean Patrick Maloney against Nan Hayworth. And those were those two elections. So that speaks to it.
And what about the third?
Those were two.
Those were two. Okay, thank you.
I voted the last three elections in New York State, in New York City. I lived in New York City. I sold my apartment there about 7 years ago. I've had a home in Greene County for almost 15 years. Unfortunately, my mother had Alzheimer's, so I needed to keep a residence down in New York City. I rented a place and was close to her and chose to keep voting there as my schedule was not my own. But I've been registered to vote here since November of 2016.
went to law school at Harvard near Boston, so that's where I voted in the last election. In 2014, I was working in Albany in the governor's office, so I voted in Albany. In 2012, I was also registered to vote in Albany, but I was in Breezy Point, Queens, right after Hurricane Sandy, and helping with the storm relief effort, so I actually did not get to go back up to Albany to vote. But those are where I've been the last 3 elections.
So I was living in Montclair, New Jersey the last 2 or 3 years. I voted there before I moved here earlier this year. Before that, I was living in New York City, so I voted there. Happy to be home and vote for the next one, actually win the next one. And happy to be back in a place that me and my wife are very pleased to call home with our families. My wife is from Woodstock, went to Kingston High School. I am from Schenectady, born and raised in this area, and we are happy to bring this back.
I've voted in District 19 the last 35 years.
That's it.
So I'm going to go back 3, and I voted the 3rd and the 2nd in the 18th district, which was before the redistricting to make it the 19th district. And this last congressional election, I did not vote. And I will tell you that I have been very upfront about this. I was like many apathetic Americans who were done and frustrated. And this is how I am righting that wrong. And when I wake up, I get going.
So I made the far grand trekking move 1,800 feet over the county line as I lived in Orange County for the past 3 congressional elections. But on the other hand, I did vote for the only member of Congress to have held a town hall in this district, so I have that going.
It took me a second because I lived in DC in 2012 and 14, which is where my company was. And then I remembered, oh, there isn't a representative in DC, so that's why I was struggling. So DC in 2012 and 14, and then voted in New York City in 2016, which is where my wife and I moved first when we moved up from DC. That's where her mom lives. That's where we were quite honestly planning to have our kids. And November changed everything for us, and that's why we're home now living in Gardner.
Thank you.
So I'm very pleased to have that question. 30 seconds is very short, though. As I noted before, I outraised FASO 2 quarters in a row, and I'm very proud of that fact, and I can promise you that every single contribution came from an individual. It came from a friend. It came from a colleague. It came from an associate, someone that I or my wife have a relationship with, and somebody who understands what my platform is. And that platform is working families. That platform is opportunity. There's no certain quid pro quo here. This is, we want to buy into what you're preaching, Antonio. We believe in what you're bringing to the table. We want to help you get there. Thank you.
Day 1 that I'm in Congress, I will introduce legislation to overturn Citizens United that has to be priority number 1. My campaign financing, when I launched, I said I'm doing a $19 for New York 19 grassroots campaign. We've been enormously successful, raised a lot of money to compete with FASO. I've had over 800 donors, 600 under $100 or less, over 90% right here in the state. So I am funded by folks here in the state, here in the district, grassroots contributions, and that's how I believe we can beat FASO.
I have hundreds of small dollar donors. I won't take money from anybody that doesn't believe in our platform, like Antonio said. The largest contributor to my campaign is me. I've decided to invest in this campaign because I'm not going to ask other people to invest in this campaign if I'm not willing to put my skin in the game. I've told my children that if we don't win this election and take back Congress, there's no point in going to college anyway. They don't really support that move. And I will raise and spend whatever it takes to beat John Faso.
Money is a corruption in our politics, and it's not the path to victory, and it hasn't been the path to victory in this election or in other elections around the country in this cycle and one before it. I am running a campaign based on small grassroots organizing and small donors. I am not taking it from colleagues who are actually members of the largest lobbying law firm in the United States. I'm not a Citigroup executive, former Citigroup executive, with that kind of money from the work I've done to ship jobs overseas and shut down factories. These things are of enormous concern to me, and I do think they can corrupt our process. Thank you.
So for me, similar, I think, to everybody else, just like when I finance my company, you're calling your friends and your family, people I served with, people I've worked with in business, people I went to grad school with. I think we've had maybe 800 or so donors. I should know the exact number. And in just the first 3 weeks of our fundraising, we raised over $200,000. It is going to be critical to build the war chest that we need to beat John Faso. The system is broken, but we are in the system. We got to win to change the system, so I'm focusing on that. Thank you.
Nah. So what the approach that I took, because obviously fundraising is necessary, is using my background in data analytics. I went through the FEC database and I analyzed people's donation behaviors in order to identify the people most likely to donate to me. These are small dollar donors, and I've been diligently calling them, but the main funder of my campaign, again, like Brian, but not as much as me.
Yes, I'm the main funder of the campaign.
Ryan, would you like to make an investment in me? So I've been a fundraiser for not-for-profit organizations most of my career. I find this whole process and amount of money going toward communicating disgusting. But my largest donors are sitting here, my mom and dad, and I am focused on engaging folks, asking for the investment, and I will do what it takes to pay for the campaign that I need to run with integrity.
I, like Brian and Steve, am also my biggest campaign funder. Unfortunately, my kids have already gone to college. I could have used some of that. But my concern, I want to join Jeff in the concern that the amount of money that comes from corporate places is something that influences our government in a really dangerous way, in a really unhealthy way. And so I've made a pledge that I'm not going to take any corporate money.